There is a quiet power in the way we choose to carry ourselves, a presence that makes no sound, yet echoes through every corner of our lives. You notice it in the way someone enters a room, in the calm that settles in their eyes, in the steady way they face uncertainty. This presence isn't born from knowing how the future will unfold. It is born from belief. It is the deliberate choice to act as if things will work out long before any proof arrives. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind shapes its own reality, that our strength comes not from what happens to us, but from the posture we take toward it. To live as if everything is always working out for you is not delusion. It is discipline. It is the conscious choice of courage over fear, of resilience over despair, of trust over hesitation. And that single choice, repeated day after day, quietly transforms a life. If you seek to walk with this kind of stillness and strength, to stop waiting for certainty and start living with clarity, then consider this an invitation, not merely to follow a voice, but to commit to your own growth, your own philosophy, your own unshakable self. Belief is an invisible force, yet it quietly moves everything in our world. You cannot hold it in your hand or measure it with any tool, but you can feel its presence in every room you enter. You hear it in the tone of a person's voice, whether they speak with the tremor of doubt or the quiet hum of certainty. You see it in the way they stand, shoulders heavy with fear or lifted with resilience. You notice it in how they meet a challenge, shrinking back, waiting for the blow to land, or leaning forward, ready to respond. Two people can face the very same storm, yet their lives will unfold in completely different ways. One becomes paralyzed by hesitation, questioning every move. The other adapts, learns, and continues to move forward. The difference is not luck or intellect. The difference is belief, the story each person carries into the wind. That unseen story creates very real consequences. A person who believes they are doomed to fail begins to act in ways that ensure failure. They stop reaching out. They cease knocking on doors. They no longer look for the possibility of something better. The world has not locked them out. They have simply stopped trying the handle. Meanwhile, someone who carries the belief that things will eventually work out walks through the exact same situation differently. They stay in the conversation a little longer. They try again after the first attempt falls flat. They interpret rejection not as a dead end, but as a redirection. Think of how often you have seen this. Two people experience the same setback, losing a job, ending a relationship. One becomes bitter, convinced the universe has singled them out for hardship. The other, though just as shaken, chooses to see it as a turning point, an opening to a door they cannot yet see. Months later, their paths are unrecognizable. One remains trapped in the pain of what was lost, while the other has discovered possibilities they never imagined. The circumstances did not change. Their beliefs did. What makes belief so powerful is not that it guarantees an outcome. Life is far too unpredictable for that. What belief changes is your posture within uncertainty. A person who believes they will fail sees every difficulty as confirmation. A person who believes they can find a way through sees that same difficulty as a test of their resourcefulness. As Seneca reminded us, we suffer not from events in our lives, but from our judgment of them. Belief changes that judgment, and in doing so, it changes how we suffer, how we grow, and how we rise. It is easy to underestimate this power, because belief is silent. You cannot see it the way you see effort. You cannot count it like money in the bank. But it is always there, shaping whether effort is even spent, whether opportunities are even noticed. Belief is the architect of our behavior. It quietly designs how we respond to setbacks, whether we take risks, and if we follow through. Over time, that design becomes the blueprint of a life. If you look back on your own turning points, you will likely find belief hiding at their center. A time you dared to try when you didn't feel ready. A moment you could have given up, but instead told yourself, "Let's just see where this goes." Those decisions were not born from certainty. They were born from belief. The invisible but powerful voice that urged you to move forward anyway. And because you did, you created something real. A result, a memory, a piece of evidence to carry into the next challenge. This is why belief is never just wishful thinking. It is not blind optimism or pretending problems don't exist. It is a strategy. It is the foundation of resilience. It is the choice to give yourself something solid to stand on before the ground has revealed itself. As Plato said, the beginning is the most important part of the work, and belief is that beginning. It is the inner commitment that sets everything else in motion. So when you find yourself hesitating at the edge of something new, when fear whispers that you don't have enough proof, remember this: proof comes later. Belief comes first. It is not about waiting for a guarantee. It is about carrying a mindset that allows you to act without one. Because once you begin, the evidence you were searching for starts to reveal itself, piece by piece. In this way, belief becomes self-fulfilling. Not because it bends the world to your will, but because it shapes you into someone who can meet the world differently. And that is why the invisible power of belief is never truly invisible. It shows up in your actions, your presence, your resilience. It shows up in the way others are drawn to you, not because you promise certainty, but because you carry yourself with a trust in the process. Belief is the quiet signal that you are anchored, even in a storm. And when you live from that place, you don't just change your outcomes. You change the very experience of the journey itself. We are all storytellers, whether we realize it or not. From the moment we wake, our minds begin to weave a narrative about who we are, where we are going, and what today means. This story isn't written in ink, but it is no less powerful for being invisible. It plays like a soundtrack in the background of our lives, guiding our steps, shaping our decisions, and silently defining what we believe is possible. And here is the remarkable truth. The mind does not argue with the story it is told. It accepts it. It takes the words you repeat to yourself and treats them as fact, no matter how limiting or liberating they may be. So the question is not if you are telling a story, but which story you are telling. Is it a narrative that keeps you captive, or one that sets you free? Consider again how two people can experience the same event and interpret it in completely different ways. One person loses a job and tells themselves, "This is the end. I wasn't good enough." Another loses the same job and says, "This is an opening, a chance to rebuild." The event itself is neutral. What gives it meaning is the story. And that story dictates what happens next. The one who believes they are a failure will shrink from opportunity. The one who believes a setback is a stepping stone will take risks, show up differently, and create something new. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The story you choose is where that power begins. Think about the stories you have been repeating to yourself. Perhaps a quiet whisper of, "I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at this." Or a conviction that you are unlucky, that opportunities are meant for others. Over time, these are not just thoughts. They become the lens through which you see the world. Your brain begins to scan for evidence to support the narrative, confirming your own biases. It isn't trying to sabotage you. It is simply doing its job, creating a world that makes sense according to the script you have provided. This is why changing your story is one of the most powerful acts of self-mastery. It doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means rewriting the meaning of reality. When something difficult happens, your brain asks, "What does this mean?" If you have already decided that life is against you, the answer will reinforce hopelessness. But if you carry the belief that things are working in your favor, even when you cannot see how, the same event becomes fuel for growth. As Seneca reminded us, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials. If your story includes that truth, then every difficulty becomes part of the polishing. You can likely remember a moment when a single shift in your story changed everything. Perhaps you faced a rejection that felt crushing until you reframed it as protection from the wrong path. Or you were stuck in a challenge that felt unbearable until you began to see it as training rather than punishment. The external situation did not change. What changed was the narrative, and with it, your energy, your persistence, and your ability to move forward. The stories we tell ourselves also define our identity. If you believe you are a person who never follows through, your actions will confirm it. If you believe you are resourceful and adaptable, you will prove yourself right in the moments that matter. The narrative you carry into a room speaks before you do. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." When you craft a story that aligns with the person you want to become, your actions naturally begin to follow. But here is where many of us get stuck. We believe the story we inherited is the one we must keep. Perhaps a parent told you that you would never amount to much, or a teacher doubted your ability. Without realizing it, their story became your story. But the truth is, you always have the right to edit. You hold the pen. Stories written by others may have shaped your past, but only you can write the script for your future. Let us not pretend this is easy. Old stories are sticky. The longer you have repeated one, the more comfortable it feels, even if it is damaging. Self-doubt can feel strangely natural, while self-belief feels like a risk. This is where belief and storytelling connect. When you choose to act, as if everything always works out for you, you are giving your brain a better narrative to follow. Instead of whispering, "I'll never make it," you say, "This is part of the process, and I will find a way." Those are not empty affirmations. They are new scripts designed to guide your actions. Over time, those actions create results that reinforce the new belief. The most inspiring people you know, the ones who light up a room and make you feel that anything is possible, are not necessarily the most gifted. They are the ones who carry stories of resilience, growth, and possibility. Their belief is contagious because their story radiates through their actions, and it doesn't stop with them. It shapes how others see their own lives. So the challenge is simple, but not easy. Notice the story you are telling, and if it is not serving you, choose a better one. The brain will believe whatever story it hears most often, and that voice is usually your own. You can decide whether that voice is a critic or a coach, a prison guard or a liberator. In the end, the stories we tell ourselves are not just reflections of who we are. They are blueprints for who we are becoming. Ask yourself now, what story are you rehearsing? Because whichever one you choose, your life will follow its lead. We are told all our lives to be realistic. It is presented as the wisest path, a shield against disappointment. Parents say it to children who dream too big. Friends say it when our goals scare them more than they inspire us. But listen closely to what that advice truly means. Too often, be realistic is a gentle command to lower your expectations. It is a quiet suggestion to not reach too far. It is resignation dressed in the robes of wisdom. It feels safe, but in reality, It is the very thing that keeps us from the lives we are capable of living. When realism dominates your thinking, it slowly drains away possibility. Instead of daring to ask, "What if this works?" you begin to whisper, "What if it doesn't?" That small shift changes everything. The first question moves you forward. The second keeps you standing still. The irony is that this kind of realism often creates the very outcomes it seeks to avoid. Lower your aim to prevent disappointment, and you end up with a life of quiet disappointment. Avoid risk to stay safe, and you still find yourself restless, wondering what might have been. As Seneca warned, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. A life spent being too realistic is one of the surest ways to waste it. The great thinkers of history rarely described themselves as realists. They leaned toward something more daring: vision, imagination, possibility. They knew that the human spirit is crushed not by failure, but by the refusal to even try. What is realism but the clever excuse we use to justify that refusal? The trap is subtle because it masquerades as responsibility. You believe you are being practical, saving yourself from foolishness. But what you are really doing is letting fear dictate your choices. Realism tells you not to start the business because most fail. It tells you not to pursue the relationship because heartbreak is possible. It tells you not to take the leap because the ground beneath your feet is more familiar than the air. But as Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Realism convinces you that you are nothing more than your past. Belief allows you to act as if the future can still be rewritten. This does not mean we abandon reason. Blind optimism can be just as destructive as paralyzing realism. The balance lies in grounded hope, in choosing to step forward not because the outcome is certain, but because you trust yourself to adapt. When people tell you to be realistic, what they often mean is, don't expect too much. But why not? Why shouldn't you expect more from yourself, from your work, from your life? Why trade the possibility of greatness for the guarantee of mediocrity? The realist seeks to avoid pain by never stepping into the arena. The one who lives by belief may endure the pain of the fight, but it is there, in the arena, that they discover transformation. Which path truly honors the short time we have been given? Realism is also self-fulfilling. If you believe your efforts will fail, you will unconsciously act in ways that confirm it. You will hesitate. You will avoid. You will interpret every setback as proof that you were foolish to try. The realist calls this wisdom. It is surrender. The people we admire most rarely lived realistic lives. They were the ones who chose to act as if possibility was worth chasing, even when it made no sense to others. Their stories remind us that the safest path is often the most dangerous one of all, for it leads to a life unlived. Socrates once reminded his followers that an unexamined life is not worth living. To examine your life is to ask a single piercing question. Are you making choices from a place of freedom or from a place of fear? All too often, realism serves as a masterful disguise for fear, its voice so familiar we no longer recognize it. When you allow yourself to rise above this so-called realism, you begin to see that life is not about guarantees. It is about participation. It is about showing up fully, even when the outcome is shrouded in uncertainty. A person who acts only when certainty is promised will remain frozen in place forever. But a person who acts on belief, who dares to expect more, begins to shape outcomes that were at first invisible. This is why optimism is not naive. It is courageous. It takes immense courage to see possibility where others see only limitation, to walk into the vast unknown carrying a quiet conviction that something meaningful will emerge. The truth is, most people are not defeated by external obstacles. They are defeated by the internal story they tell themselves about what is realistic. They never write the book, launch the business, or chase the dream, because they have convinced themselves it is impossible. Yet history is a tapestry woven with the stories of those who ignored realism and created something extraordinary. Was it realistic for a philosopher to spend years writing meditations for no one but himself, words that would outlast his empire by centuries? Was it realistic for an artist to paint canvases that no one valued in his lifetime? And yet, their refusal to be bound by the chains of realism gave the world treasures that endure. You don't need to abandon all caution or ignore the facts. But you must learn to recognize when realism has crossed the line into resignation, when it has stopped serving you as a guide and has started to cage you like a prison. At that point, the wise choice is not to shrink your dreams, but to expand your courage. So the next time someone tells you to be realistic, pause. Listen carefully. Are they offering you wisdom, or are they projecting their own fear? Are they encouraging you to prepare well, or are they quietly telling you to lower your standards? You will know the difference. One will sharpen you, the other will shrink you. One will leave you feeling capable, the other will leave you feeling smaller. And when you recognize that difference, you will understand why realism, more often than not, is just another name for surrender. The greatest trap of realism is that it sounds so sensible. It whispers that you are wise for avoiding risk, clever for lowering your hopes. But in truth, it keeps you circling the same small patch of ground, never daring to see what lies beyond the horizon. Life is far too short for that. If you want to live fully, you must be willing to risk disappointment for the chance at discovery, because the alternative, a life shaped by fear disguised as realism, is no life at all. In the end, the call is not to abandon realism entirely, but to see it for what it often is, a mask for resignation, a voice of fear. Your task is to replace it with a stronger voice, one that says, "Even if I fail, I will learn. Even if I stumble, I will rise. Even if I lose, I will grow." That is not reckless hope. That is disciplined belief. And it is this belief that turns a life merely survived into a life deeply lived. Because the truth is, it was never realism that moved the world forward. It was always those who dared to believe in more. Two people can face the exact same moment in life, yet walk away into two completely different realities. One person loses their job and quietly tells themselves, "This proves I wasn't good enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe life is against me." Another person loses their job and says, "This hurts, but maybe it's an opening to something better. Maybe this is the push I needed toward a path I never would have chosen on my own." The facts of the event are identical. Both are unemployed. Both have bills to pay. Both feel the weight of uncertainty on their shoulders. But the meaning they assign to the event, the lens they choose to look through, changes everything about how their future unfolds. As Carl Jung once said, "It all depends on how we look at things, and not how they are in themselves." That is the lens at work. This lens isn't something we put on occasionally. It is always with us. It is the intricate set of stories, beliefs, and assumptions that shapes how we interpret every single experience. The same rainstorm is a ruined afternoon for one and a blessing for another. The same criticism is crushing to one person, and a chance to improve for another. The same rejection is proof of inadequacy to one, and a redirection toward better alignment for another. It isn't life that assigns meaning to our moments. It's us. And that meaning has real consequences, because it dictates not just how we feel, but what we do next. The danger is that most of us don't even realize we're looking through a lens at all. We assume that what we see is reality itself, when in truth, it is reality filtered through layers of past experiences, old fears, and stories we've repeated so many times we no longer question them. Someone who grew up being told they would never succeed might see every obstacle as a validation of that script. Someone who was encouraged to experiment and fail might see those same obstacles as stepping stones. Both are looking at the same situation, but their lenses are so different, they may as well be living in different worlds. This is where self-awareness becomes crucial. If you don't take the time to examine the lens you're using, it will quietly govern your life without your permission. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing pain, he was pointing to the fact that our lens often magnifies suffering unnecessarily. We imagine outcomes that never come to pass. We interpret temporary difficulties as permanent fixtures. We let the story we've told ourselves add weight to what is already heavy. But when you realize that suffering is magnified by interpretation, you begin to loosen its grip. Think about how this plays out in daily life. A setback at work can be seen as a humiliation or as a push to sharpen your skills. A difficult conversation can be proof that relationships are fragile or proof that honesty can make them stronger. Even silence from someone can be read as rejection or as an opportunity to build your own independence. The lens you choose doesn't just change your feelings in the moment. It sets a trajectory for where your energy goes. One path leads to despair, the other to resilience. Epictetus often reminded his students that events themselves are indifferent. It is our opinions about them that cause turmoil. If you train your mind to pause before labeling an event as good or bad, you give yourself a chance to shape its meaning more intentionally. Losing a job isn't automatically a curse or a blessing. It is raw material. What you build from it depends entirely on the lens you choose to apply. And here is the subtle truth. That lens doesn't just change how you think. It changes how you act, and those actions create real, tangible outcomes. Consider someone who tells themselves after a setback, "I'm not good enough." With that belief as their guide, they stop trying, avoid risks, and shy away from opportunities. The lens has trapped them in a cycle that ensures their story becomes reality. Now consider the person who says, "This is an opening to something better." That belief energizes them to network, to search, to refine their craft. They walk into rooms with curiosity instead of shame. They may not land the perfect outcome immediately, but their lens sets them in motion. And motion is what creates opportunity. The event was the same. The lens built two entirely different futures. What makes this so challenging is that our lenses are often inherited. You didn't choose them consciously. They were passed down by parents, reinforced by teachers, and shaped by early experiences. Maybe you were told to play it safe, and now safety colors every decision. Maybe you were told the world is harsh, and now you interpret every interaction through a veil of suspicion. Shifting your lens doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. It happens the next time something doesn't go your way, and you pause to ask, what else could this mean? That single question creates a crack in the old narrative, a space for new meaning to enter. Slowly, those moments accumulate, and the lens begins to clear. Jung reminded us, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You cannot become who you are meant to be if you remain trapped behind a lens built from fear and resignation. You become yourself by reshaping the meaning of your experiences into something that builds you rather than breaks you. And it is vital to see that choosing a different lens isn't the same as denying pain. It is not about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It is about holding pain in one hand and possibility in the other. It is about saying, yes, this hurts, and yes, it can also teach me something. The realist will call this naive. The Stoic would call it strength, because strength isn't about ignoring the storm. It's about choosing how to see yourself within it. Look closely at the people you admire most, and you will notice they are not the ones who avoided hardship. They are the ones who interpreted hardship differently. They didn't see failure as a final verdict. They saw it as training. They didn't see rejection as proof of their worthlessness. They saw it as redirection. Their lens didn't remove the difficulty, but it transformed it into fuel. That is why their lives inspire us, not because they escaped struggle, but because they turned struggle into a foundation. Every day, life hands you experiences. Some are joyful, some are painful, some are confusing. The lens you carry determines whether those experiences become anchors or wings. You can allow them to hold you down, or you can let them lift you to new heights of strength. And while you may not always control the timing or the nature of events, you always control the meaning you assign to them. That meaning becomes your compass. It guides where you go, how you endure, and what you create next. So when the next challenge comes, and it will, remember that you have a choice. You can see it through the lens that says, "This proves I am not enough." Or you can choose the lens that says, "This is opening a door I cannot yet see." One path narrows your life, the other expands it. And if you begin living with the conviction that everything works out for you, your lens will start searching for evidence of that truth. Slowly, you'll notice opportunities you missed before, strength you didn't know you had, and doors you didn't even realize were waiting to open. The lens you carry colors every experience, but you are the one who decides what shade it will take. Choose carefully, because in time, that choice becomes the story of your life. And if you choose the lens that frees you instead of the one that limits you, you will begin to see that the world has always held more possibility than you ever realized. It was only your perception that had to change. Your brain is one of the most powerful storytellers you will ever meet. And the strange thing is, it is always working on your behalf, even when it feels like it's working against you. Every second of your life, your mind is scanning the environment, filtering out an endless stream of information, and piecing together a picture that feels coherent. But here is the secret. It builds that picture based on the story you have already told it. If you whisper to yourself, day after day, that you are unlucky, your brain will dutifully search for proof to reinforce that belief. It will highlight every rejection, every missed opportunity, every disappointment, and stitch them together into a seamless narrative of failure. On the other hand, if you tell yourself that things always have a way of working out, your brain shifts its focus. It begins scanning for opportunities, spotting details you would have otherwise overlooked, and drawing connections that support the idea of possibility. The world has not changed. Your lens has. Carl Jung once said, "Perception is real, even if it is not reality." What he meant is that the way you frame your experiences becomes the reality you inhabit. The brain isn't concerned with absolute truth, it's concerned with consistency. If you keep repeating that you are doomed to struggle, your mind will accept that as a directive. It will quietly align your actions to support that belief. You will hesitate when you should act. You will doubt yourself when you should persist. You will walk into a room already convinced of defeat, and others will sense it. Not because failure is written in your destiny, but because your biology is carrying out the orders of your belief. This mechanism has a scientific name: confirmation bias. It is your brain's tendency to favor information that aligns with what you already believe, while ignoring or downplaying anything that contradicts it. It is efficient, but it is also limiting. Imagine believing you are unlucky. A stranger smiles at you on the street, but your mind dismisses it as meaningless. Later, someone cuts you off in traffic, and your brain pounces. See? Proof you're cursed with bad luck. Both events happened, but your brain decided which one mattered, because it had already been given its instructions. Epictetus understood this long before neuroscience confirmed it. "It's not what happens to you," he said, "but how you react to it that matters. Your reaction is shaped by what your mind has been primed to notice." The fascinating thing is that the reverse is also true. If you give your brain a belief that supports growth, it will search tirelessly for evidence to back it up. You tell yourself, "Everything works out for me." And suddenly that smile from a stranger is not meaningless. It is a sign that the world is not as cold as you thought. The inconvenience of being cut off in traffic becomes a reminder that you arrived safely, not evidence of a curse. The events did not change, but their meaning did, and so did the emotional weight you carried away from them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." If your thoughts set your brain's filter to possibility, your life begins to bend in that direction. What makes this even more powerful is the feedback loop it creates. Once your brain starts finding evidence for your belief, it reinforces the belief itself. You say, "I will figure this out." Then you notice yourself making small progress, which strengthens your conviction, which in turn fuels more action. Each cycle builds upon the last, until belief and evidence blur into one. What started as an act of faith becomes a reality supported by experience. This is why so many people who decide to act as if everything will work out eventually find that it does, not because the universe magically bends to their will, but because their biology keeps them in motion long enough to create outcomes that match the story they have chosen. Seneca captured this dynamic when he said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." The imagination he spoke of is the brain's filter at work. Fear primes your mind to search for threats, and it finds them everywhere. But belief primes your mind to search for solutions, and those begin to multiply. The world is filled with both danger and opportunity. The filter you hand your brain determines which one you will notice most. You have probably seen this play out in the people around you. Some carry an air of defeat everywhere they go. Even when something good happens, they dismiss it. They will win a small victory, but say, "It won't last." Their brain takes the cue and files it away as an anomaly. Others, though, carry themselves with a kind of quiet optimism. They see even setbacks as part of the process. They say, "This is teaching me something." And their brain obediently scans for lessons instead of evidence of doom. The same world, two entirely different lives. The question, then, is simple but profound. Which filter are you handing your brain? If you feed it stories of limitation, you should not be surprised when it delivers a life defined by those limits. If you give it stories of resilience, it will become your ally, searching constantly for signs that confirm your strength. This is why the practice of reframing is so powerful. When something goes wrong, instead of letting your brain automatically confirm the worst, you pause. You ask, "What else could this mean?" That small question cracks open the rigid filter and lets in light. You lose an opportunity, and instead of saying, "This proves I'm not good enough," you say, "Maybe this wasn't the right fit. Maybe something better is being prepared." That is not denial. It is redirection. It does not ignore pain, but it refuses to let pain dictate the story. And here is the deeper truth. Your brain is not just scanning for evidence in the world, it is also scanning inside you. Every action you take becomes proof it uses to either strengthen or weaken your belief. This is why action is so crucial. Tell yourself you are resilient, then take even one small step forward, and your brain records it as evidence. You did not just say it, you lived it. Over time, the accumulated weight of those actions builds a belief system that feels unshakable. Epictetus's words echo here, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When your actions become evidence, your philosophy becomes your reality. Of course, the brain will always try to save energy by running old scripts. It prefers the familiar, even when the familiar is harmful. That is why changing your filter feels uncomfortable at first. Believing in possibility when you have been telling yourself a story of failure can feel unnatural, even foolish. But discomfort does not mean it is wrong. It means you are breaking an old habit. As Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Changing your filter is not a single decision. It is a repeated act, a habit of choosing possibility over fear, until the brain accepts it as the new normal. This process takes patience. At times, your brain will fight back, trying to drag you into the old narrative. But if you persist, if you keep handing it a better filter, the shift will come. Slowly, opportunities will begin to stand out where before you only saw obstacles. You will notice your energy shifting. You will find yourself responding differently to challenges, carrying yourself with more calm and confidence. It is not magic. It is biology, following the orders of your chosen belief. The beauty of this is that once your brain accepts a new filter, it begins to work on your behalf without you even asking. It will highlight connections, spark creativity, and lead you to insights that align with your chosen story. A belief in resilience makes your mind resourceful. A belief in failure makes it defensive. Both are self-fulfilling, but only one leads to growth. So the question comes back, as it always does. What filter are you giving your brain? Because whether you realize it or not, your biology is already at work, building a reality to match the story you have chosen. If you have been living under the weight of a limiting belief, understand this: you are not stuck with it. You can change the filter. You can choose to act as if everything always works out for you, not because life guarantees it, but because that belief sets your mind in motion to create outcomes that look a lot like things working out. The power of belief is not abstract. It is not a motivational slogan. It is the wiring of your biology, the mechanism of your brain, the unseen engine that colors your days and shapes your future. If you want a different life, begin with a different story. Give your brain the filter that empowers rather than weakens, and then watch as your biology does the rest, aligning perception, guiding action, and creating evidence that matches the belief you have chosen to live by. Ultimately, it is not the world that proves you right or wrong. It is your own mind, faithfully searching for the world you have instructed it to see. Optimism is a word burdened by misunderstanding. People hear it and envision someone walking about with blinders on, pretending all is well as the world burns around them. They mistake it for denial, a stubborn refusal to see reality for what it is. But true optimism is nothing of the sort. Real optimism is a discipline. It is the daily, conscious choice to search for possibilities, even when your fears scream louder than your hope. It is the fortitude to look into the heart of a storm and declare, "I may not see the path, but I will forge one." Pessimism is easy. Cynicism is effortless. Anyone can point to what is broken and declare it hopeless. But optimism, true and grounded optimism, requires training. It demands strength. It is a posture of resilience, not delusion. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in the darkest of times, reminded his own heart, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That is optimism as discipline. It does not pretend the obstacle isn't there. It insists the obstacle itself can be used, transformed into the very means of progress. The person who trains themselves to see this truth develops a quiet power. They cease wasting energy resisting what has already come to pass, and instead focus all their efforts on how to move forward. This isn't naivety. It is mastery of perspective. The truth is, pessimism feels natural because it requires nothing of you. It is a retreat. It spares you the profound discomfort of hope. When you expect the worst, you insulate yourself from disappointment, but you also sever yourself from all possibility. The pessimist reasons, "If I believe in nothing, I cannot be hurt." But in doing so, they come to inhabit a cage of their own making. Optimism, by contrast, requires you to risk disappointment in exchange for discovery. It asks you to carry hope even after you have been let down. That is why it is a discipline. It must be chosen again and again, especially when it is the hardest choice to make. Consider how this plays out in the small, ordinary struggles of daily life. You face rejection. Pessimism whispers, "See? You are not worthy. Why would you ever try again?" But optimism, as discipline, responds, "This hurts, but it is also proof that I am alive, that I am daring. It is teaching me something I will need for the next attempt." You face failure. Pessimism declares, "This is the end." Optimism replies, "This is feedback." The event is the same. The story you tell yourself is different, and the story you choose becomes the energy you carry forward. This mindset is not built overnight. It grows, much like a muscle, through deliberate practice. At first, it may feel unnatural, even forced. You might wake up, and your first instinct is a familiar dread, the day feeling heavy before it has even begun. But then you deliberately redirect your focus. You ask yourself, what can I still build today? What remains possible? That small act is optimism as discipline. Each time you practice it, you strengthen the neural pathways that support it. Over time, it becomes easier. Not effortless, but more natural. This is not mere philosophy, it is biology. The human brain is wired with what psychologists call a negativity bias, a primal instinct to notice threats more readily than opportunities, because our very survival once depended on it. That is why pessimism can feel so instinctive. But our wiring can be retrained. By deliberately practicing optimism, by searching for what remains possible, you begin to reshape the very lens through which your brain filters the world. You start to see patterns of opportunity where once you saw only patterns of danger. The world does not become easier. You become stronger within it. There is also a quiet magnetism to a person who carries this disciplined optimism. Think of the people you admire most, the ones who seem steady even in the midst of chaos. They do not sugarcoat reality, but neither do they collapse beneath its weight. Their optimism creates a sense of calm, of direction, a feeling that things, however difficult, can be figured out. Others are drawn to them, not because they possess all the answers, but because they refuse to surrender their spirit to despair. Their optimism becomes a form of leadership, one born not of speeches or slogans, but of sheer presence. This is why optimism must never be confused with wishful thinking. Wishful thinking says, "Everything will be fine if I just hope hard enough." Optimism as discipline says, "Everything may not be fine yet, but I trust myself to find a way through." One is passive, the other active. One waits for the world to change, the other begins changing the way it responds to the world. The disciplined optimist does not ignore risk. They face it with eyes open, but they refuse to let risk paralyze them. In practice, this means optimism is not about eliminating fear. It is about choosing which voice you will heed. Fear will always be there, whispering its doubts. But optimism can step in as the louder voice, the one that says, "Yes, this is uncertain, but I have the strength to endure. Yes, this is difficult, but it may also hold hidden gifts." The discipline lies in choosing which voice guides your next step. When you live this way, you begin to see setbacks differently. A door closes and you do not collapse. You ask where another might be opening. A plan fails, and instead of stopping, you treat it as data. You keep moving, keep refining, keep building. Over time, people will call this resilience. But resilience is just optimism trained into a habit. It is the fruit of choosing belief again and again until it becomes a part of who you are. The disciplined optimist is not untouched by pain. They feel it deeply. They have doubts. They stumble. But they return time and again to the posture of belief. They carry themselves with a quiet strength, not because they expect life to be easy, but because they have trained themselves to believe that life, no matter how harsh, will always hold a way forward. And in the long run, that single choice changes everything. So when you hear the word optimism, do not mistake it for naivety. See it for what it truly is: a discipline. The courage to keep choosing possibility when fear feels louder. The strength to treat obstacles as teachers. The commitment to carry hope, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because without hope, there is no reason to move at all. In a world where pessimism is the path of least resistance, optimism is an act of rebellion. It is the discipline of refusing to surrender your future to despair. And that discipline, practiced day by day, will shape not just your mindset, but your entire life. We are often taught to believe that confidence is a prerequisite for action, a feeling we must wait for. We tell ourselves, "When I feel ready, then I will begin." But life seldom honors this arrangement. If you wait for confidence to arrive before you act, you will wait forever. Belief does not usually come first. It is built in the process of doing. You take a step, however uncertain, and in that step, you discover you did not fall apart. You try something new, and even if you stumble, you learn that stumbling is not fatal. Slowly, one action at a time, your brain begins to build a library of evidence, proof that you are stronger, more capable, and more adaptable than you ever thought. Confidence is not the prerequisite for action. It is the byproduct of it. The people who seem most self-assured did not sit around waiting to feel certain. They moved anyway. They risked embarrassment, failure, and rejection. They acted without guarantees. And because they acted, they gathered the proof they needed to finally believe in themselves. As Aristotle once wrote, "We become just by doing just acts, brave by doing brave acts." His point was simple. We do not wait to feel brave before doing something courageous. We act courageously first, and in the act itself, courage is formed. Carl Jung echoed this when he said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Identity does not grow from promises or plans. It grows from actions, from the small daily decisions to show up, even when fear whispers that you should not. The moment you take that first shaky step, you give your mind something real to work with. The internal murmur of, "I can't handle this," begins to lose its power when your own actions prove it a liar. Think of times in your life when you discovered this truth. Perhaps you were nervous before a presentation, convinced you would fail. But once you began speaking, the nerves settled. Perhaps you dreaded a difficult conversation, but once you faced it, you realized it was not as unbearable as you had imagined. In each case, action came first, and belief followed. If you had waited until you felt confident, you might never have begun. But because you moved, you created the very confidence you thought you needed. This is why the first step is often the hardest, but also the most transformative. Before you act, all you have is theory, doubt, and imagined catastrophe. After you act, you have evidence. You know, at the very least, that you can survive trying. You know that rejection did not kill you, that failure taught you something, that discomfort eventually passes. Each piece of evidence adds weight to the belief that you can continue. Step by step, you build a foundation of confidence, not by thinking, but by doing. Think of a child learning to walk. They do not wait until they feel confident before taking their first step. They wobble, they fall, they try again. With each attempt, they gather proof that their legs can hold them. Eventually, walking becomes natural. We are no different. We only learn what we are capable of by testing ourselves, by stepping into the unknown and allowing experience to show us what we can handle. Waiting for confidence before you move is like waiting to get stronger before you ever lift a weight. The strength comes only from the practice. This principle applies to every part of life. Starting a new career, building a relationship, creating something of your own, all of it requires moving before you feel ready. The painter who waits for a guarantee of perfection will never touch the canvas. The entrepreneur who waits until all risk is gone will never begin. The person who waits to feel confident before speaking up will remain silent forever. But the one who dares to act, who is willing to learn in motion, begins to gather proof that changes everything. Of course, action does not always bring immediate success. Sometimes you will fail. Sometimes you will be rejected. But even in those moments, action provides evidence, not of your inadequacy, but of your resilience. You learn that you can withstand loss, adapt, and try again. Each setback, in its own way, becomes part of the proof that fuels your belief, reminding you that you are still standing, still learning, still capable of moving forward. There is also something contagious about people who live this way. When you see someone act with conviction, even in uncertainty, it inspires you to believe that you can too. Their courage becomes evidence not only for themselves, but for those watching. This is why true leadership is not about words or titles. It is about example. The person who dares to act first lowers the psychological cost for everyone else. They prove that the path, however intimidating, is survivable. And that proof spreads, igniting belief in others. So much of our hesitation comes from waiting for a feeling. We think, when I feel brave, I will speak. When I feel confident, I will try. But feelings more often follow actions than the other way around. The only way to feel ready is to start. The only way to feel confident is to move. The only way to believe in yourself is to collect the evidence that you can handle what life places before you. And that evidence is never found in waiting. It is found in trying. In the end, the choice is clear. You can wait indefinitely for confidence to appear, or you can move and let confidence catch up with you. One path leaves you stuck in hesitation, trapped by doubt. The other puts you in motion, building proof with every step. And over time, that proof becomes unshakable belief, not because you dreamed it into existence, but because you lived it. Action is the architect of confidence. It is the teacher of belief. It is the discipline that transforms uncertainty into strength. So ask yourself honestly, are you still waiting to feel ready? Or are you willing to begin and let readiness grow in the process? Because the moment you take that first uncertain step, you have already started to build the evidence that will one day become your confidence. And that evidence will not come from sitting still. It will come from the courage to move. Too many of us sit at the edge of our own lives, waiting. We are convinced that a perfect moment is just around the corner. We wait for the fear to quiet down, for the doubts to fade, for a green light from the universe that says, now you are ready. But waiting is deceptive. It feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels like preparation. In truth, waiting is the enemy of progress. The fog of uncertainty seldom lifts on its own. It recedes only as you dare to walk into it. The longer you stand still, the more your fear grows, whispering louder with every passing day, until the very thing you sought to avoid, failure, becomes inevitable through inaction. Think of how waiting shapes your inner world. At first, you tell yourself you are just being patient. You will begin when you feel more confident, when you have more resources, when conditions improve. But over time, hesitation hardens into a habit. You train your brain to associate possibility with paralysis. Opportunities arise and then vanish, and you begin to rationalize that they were never meant for you anyway. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you had 1,000 years to live. Fate is at your elbow." He was reminding himself, and us, that time is slipping away faster than we care to admit. Waiting feels endless, until suddenly it is not, and you find yourself wondering where the years have gone. The paradox of progress is that clarity comes after you move, not before. You cannot chart the entire path in advance, because life reveals itself one step at a time. The fog does not clear when you stand still, staring into it. It clears as you take each hesitant step forward. This is why action, however imperfect, will always defeat waiting. Even a mistake becomes data, a guidepost pointing you toward what works. When you reflect on the moments you are most proud of, they are rarely the times you waited until you were fully prepared. They are the moments you moved anyway, when you dared to speak up, to take the risk, to enter the unknown without a guarantee. Those moments carry weight because they were a breakthrough against hesitation. They gave you proof of your own capability, not because you already knew it, but because you discovered it along the way. Waiting also distorts reality. The longer you delay, the larger the challenge looms in your imagination. What might have been a manageable step begins to feel like an insurmountable mountain. Fear thrives in stillness. It spins stories, amplifies doubts, and convinces you that you are not ready. But the moment you move, reality intervenes. Often the task is not as impossible as you imagined. The conversation is not as terrifying. The project is not as overwhelming. Action shrinks fear because it replaces fantasy with fact. The tragedy is that many people confuse waiting with preparation. But preparation has movement. It is the sharpening of skills, the building of relationships, the laying of a foundation. Waiting, on the other hand, is passive. It is rehearsing the same fears, circling the same what-ifs until the opportunity has passed you by. The philosopher Epictetus once asked, "How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?" It is a question that cuts through every excuse. At what point does waiting cease to be patience and become avoidance? This is not to say that every pause is wrong. Reflection has its place. Rest has its value. But waiting for the perfect moment is an illusion. The perfect moment never arrives. Conditions are never flawless. There will always be risk, uncertainty, and discomfort. The people who build lives of meaning are not those who wait for guarantees, but those who move in spite of uncertainty. They understand that progress is made in motion, not in endless rehearsal. Think of the fog metaphor again. If you stand at the edge of a foggy road, you can see no more than a few feet ahead. Waiting does not reveal more of the path. But with every step forward, a new few feet come into view. Eventually, the entire road reveals itself, but only because you kept walking. Life is no different. Opportunities unfold in motion. Confidence grows in motion. Clarity comes in motion. Everything you are waiting for is hidden in the steps you have yet to take. And there is a deeper cost to waiting: regret. When you look back on your life, it is rarely the risks you took that will haunt you. It will be the chances you never dared to seize, the book you did not write, the words you did not say, the step you did not take. Regret is the echo of a life spent waiting. You realize too late that the opportunity did not pass you by. You let it. When you choose action, you shift the balance of power. Fear no longer dictates your pace. You may stumble, You may even fail. But each attempt builds resilience. Each movement creates momentum. And momentum is everything. A single step may seem small, but it breaks the inertia. And once inertia is broken, progress has a chance to build upon itself. Momentum makes the next step easier, and then the next, until you have journeyed further than you ever imagined possible from your place of stillness. Waiting promises safety, but it delivers stagnation. Action risks discomfort, but it creates life. And that is the central choice we face every day. Will we allow fear to keep us at the edge of the fog, or will we walk into it, trusting that the path will reveal itself as we move? The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes. But the moment you act, fear begins to fade. It never disappears completely, but it loses its hold because it no longer dictates your story. So ask yourself, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for the fear to vanish? For the path to become perfectly clear? For a guarantee that everything will work out? Those things will never arrive on their own. They are built through action. They are discovered step by step. The fog clears only when you walk. Progress comes only when you move. And if you choose to keep waiting, life will quietly slip past you. But if you dare to act, even clumsily, even imperfectly, you will discover that waiting was never your protection. It was the very thing holding you back. So many people live their lives in the waiting room of their own dreams. They keep rehearsing, planning, and imagining, but never step into the world with action. They tell themselves they are not ready yet, that they need more time, more clarity, more confidence before they can begin. But here is the truth. Readiness is not something you wait for. It is something you earn through movement. It is not the spark that starts the fire. It is the flame that grows once you have already lit the match. Every small action you take becomes proof to your own mind that you are not powerless, that you are capable, that you can move forward even when you do not feel prepared. The first step does not come after belief. Belief is forged in the first step. It is a dangerous illusion to believe that readiness will simply arrive one morning, a sign from the universe that today is the day. To wait for that moment is to fall for one of life's most treacherous myths. As Seneca warned, while we wait for life, life passes. If you wait for the perfect time, you will wait forever, because the conditions will never be flawless. And even if they were, fear would still whisper that you need more proof before you act. The only cure is to break the cycle, to move, to stumble, to take that first step long before you feel ready. It is only in the doing that you discover you can handle more than you ever thought possible. Consider how confidence is truly formed. It does not descend from the heavens as a gift. It is built, like a wall, brick by brick, each one laid by experience. The first attempt is shaky, the second, a little easier, the third, easier still. In time, the very thing that once terrified you becomes second nature. You did not wait for readiness. You created it. That first step was the hardest, yet it was also the most crucial, for it began the cycle of evidence that would carry you forward. We so often underestimate the power of small beginnings, believing only grand gestures matter. But it is the tiny, quiet acts, the email sent, the first page written, the awkward conversation started, that hold the greatest power. These are the moments that shift the story in your mind. You stop being someone who only dreams and become someone who does. The first step also fundamentally changes your relationship with fear. Before you act, fear is a giant, growing in the dark theater of your imagination, exaggerating every possible failure. But when you move, you realize the monster was never as big as you thought. Fear thrives in stillness. It weakens in motion. The act of doing, even poorly, shrinks it. You see that you can survive discomfort, rejection, even failure. And once you have seen that, fear loses its grip. Waiting, by contrast, only magnifies fear. The longer you stand at the edge, the more intimidating the leap appears. Think of hesitating at the side of a cold pool. The longer you wait, the harder it is to jump. But once you leap, the shock is brief and your body adapts. Life works the same way. The leap feels unbearable only until you take it. Then it becomes manageable, and with each new dive into discomfort, you grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius taught that if something is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But once you know something is right and true for you, the next step is not to deliberate endlessly. It is to begin. Philosophy, reflection, and planning all have their place, but without the discipline of action, they become sophisticated excuses. The first step is the principle that thought must be lived, not merely entertained. It transforms an ideal into practice. A strange momentum is born from that first movement. Once inertia is broken, energy begins to build. One action leads to another. Motion creates motion. This is why the hardest part of any endeavor is the beginning, not the continuation. The first step demands courage without evidence. Every step that follows is fueled by the proof you have already created. And that first step need not be dramatic. It doesn't have to solve everything at once. It just needs to exist. Too often, we paralyze ourselves by believing our first attempt must be perfect. But imperfection is the price of entry. Imagine a writer staring at a blank page. The moment they write anything, even messy, clumsy words, the page is no longer blank. The work has begun. You don't need to launch flawlessly. You need to begin imperfectly, because from there, you can refine, adapt, and grow. Without the first step, there is nothing to improve. The profound beauty of the first step is that it redefines your identity. Before, you were someone who wanted, hoped, or thought. After, you become someone who acts. That shift in self-perception is powerful. You begin to carry yourself with more certainty, not because you have already succeeded, but because you are finally in motion. Readiness is not a prerequisite. It is a byproduct. Confidence does not lead to action. Action leads to confidence. Power does not precede the first step. It is created by it. And once you take that step, the story you tell yourself shifts. You stop saying, "I can't," and you start saying, "I did." And that one small change changes everything. When you begin to act as if things will work out, something subtle yet undeniable happens. Your energy shifts. You carry yourself differently. A quiet conviction settles into your voice, into the way you move. And people notice. They feel it in your presence, not in your words. They sense your belief in your own path, and that belief becomes contagious. As Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This is what happens when belief is lived, not just spoken. Your conviction becomes a catalyst. Think of those who have inspired you. It likely wasn't because of their flawless advice, but because of the way they carried themselves in difficulty, the calm with which they navigated chaos, their quiet refusal to be crushed by circumstance. Their belief in the possibility of moving forward became proof you could borrow. You saw in them the evidence that it was possible to endure. This is the heart of true leadership. It has little to do with authority and everything to do with presence. A leader who radiates panic spreads panic. A leader who radiates steadiness spreads calm. People do not simply follow instructions. They mirror energy. Your belief is never just your own. It radiates outward, shaping how others think and feel. This is why the way you carry yourself matters, even when you think no one is watching. True leadership has nothing to do with a title or a position. Those things are fleeting. Enduring leadership is about becoming living evidence, a person others can look to when they have lost faith in themselves. It is about carrying yourself with such quiet conviction that your very presence gives others permission to rise. You do not announce it. You do not demand it. You simply embody it. This kind of leadership requires humility. It is not about projecting perfection. People don't need flawless heroes. They need real guides. They need to see you stumble, doubt, and fail, and keep moving anyway. Your humanity is the bridge that makes your example believable. The greatest leaders do not tell people what to do. They show them what is possible. They don't just point to the mountain. They begin the climb. Ultimately, leadership is not about being followed. It is about what you leave behind in the hearts of those you encounter. If you carry yourself with conviction, humility, and resilience, then long after your words are forgotten, your example will remain. And that example may be the very thing someone leans on when they need it most. That is the true weight of leadership, not status or recognition, but the quiet, steady presence that becomes evidence for others to believe in themselves. Failure. It is one of the most feared words in our language and one of the most misunderstood. We treat it as an ending, a final verdict on our worth, a door slammed shut. But failure is rarely the end. More often, it is the beginning of a path we could not have found otherwise. When you begin to see failure not as proof of inadequacy, but as simple feedback, everything changes. The weight you carried grows lighter. Setbacks no longer crush you. They shape you. They become the raw material of your strength. The truth is that rejection is often redirection. We rarely see it in the moment, as pain clouds our vision. A closed door feels personal, final. But with time and distance, a curious pattern emerges. The job we didn't get made room for an opportunity that truly fit. The relationship that ended pushed us toward growth we had long avoided. The project that collapsed forced us to build something far stronger on its foundations. What looked like ruin was, in fact, restructuring. It is a comfort, perhaps, to remember that failure has always been the silent companion to every meaningful achievement in history. The inventors, artists, and leaders we admire were not spared from mistakes. They were defined by how they rose from them. Thomas Edison famously remarked that he hadn't failed, but had simply found thousands of ways that wouldn't work. Each so-called failure was not an endpoint, but a piece of data, feedback guiding him ever closer to his breakthrough. What if you began to see your own setbacks in this light, not as proof of your unworthiness, but as vital information shaping the arc of your growth? But failure does more than build strength. It cultivates humility. When you have been knocked to the ground, you understand in your very bones that success is owed to no one. You cease to see progress as a straight line and begin to recognize the hidden valleys that mark every true journey. This humility is not weakness. It is an anchor. It grounds you, making you more compassionate with yourself and with others. You stop seeing those who struggle as somehow lesser and start recognizing them as simply human, just like you. And that kind of humility is magnetic, because it is real. People will always trust those who have fallen and risen more than those who have never been tested. This new perspective on failure also liberates you from the tyranny of perfectionism. Too many of us waste years waiting for flawless conditions, terrified of making a single misstep. But mistakes are not just possible. They are inevitable. Perfection is a paralyzing illusion. The only way forward is through the messy, imperfect process of trial, experiment, and error. When you begin to see failure as feedback, every experience becomes useful. A rejection is no longer a wall, but a mirror, showing you what needs adjustment, which skills to sharpen, what mindset to shift. A failed relationship might teach you the art of clearer communication. A failed business might reveal the gaps in your preparation. A failed attempt at change might illuminate the deeper fears you must confront. Each failure whispers, "Not this way. Try another." Instead of crushing you, it prepares you for what is to come. And often, failure prepares you for a future you cannot yet even imagine. What feels like devastation in the moment may, in time, reveal itself to be the very foundation of something far greater. History is filled with stories of people whose greatest setbacks set the stage for their defining moments. As Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." That secret order often reveals itself only in hindsight. The chaos of failure can be the very process by which life rearranges itself into a pattern you never could have designed on your own. Of course, none of this is to say that failure feels good. It doesn't. It hurts. It stings. It can shake your confidence to its core and make you question your entire path. But pain is not the enemy. Pain is proof that you dared to try, that you put a piece of yourself into the world. And when you are willing to sit with that discomfort, instead of running from it, you discover it has profound lessons to teach. You realize you are not as fragile as you thought. You see that the worst-case scenario is survivable, and that knowledge alone is liberating. Failure also has a way of stripping away illusions. It forces you to confront the truth of what you really want. Sometimes we chase goals for the wrong reasons, for ego, for approval, for the sake of comparison. Failure shakes those superficial motives loose, leaving behind only what truly matters. This is why so many people say that failure clarified their path more than success ever could. Success can be a distraction. Failure makes you honest. And as you begin to reframe failure, something else shifts within you: your relationship with risk. Instead of avoiding challenges out of fear, you start seeking them, knowing that even if you fail, you will grow. This shift makes you bolder. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What will I learn?" Suddenly, risk is no longer terrifying. It is fuel. It becomes the very arena where transformation happens. Think of the strongest people you know. Chances are, their strength wasn't built in easy seasons. It was forged in the moments when they stumbled, when they lost, when things did not go as they had hoped. You admire them not because their path was smooth, but because they kept walking when it was not. That is the gift of failure. It gives you the chance to practice resilience in a way that success never could. And here lies the great irony. When you stop fearing failure, you dramatically increase your chances of success. You become willing to try more, to experiment more, to put yourself out there more often. Each attempt, whether it succeeds or not, brings you closer to your goal. While others are still standing at the edge, paralyzed by the thought of falling, you have already taken 10 steps forward. You have failed, adjusted, learned, and kept going. By the time they take their first hesitant step, you have built a body of experience that nothing can replace. Reframing failure is not about pretending everything is positive. It is about refusing to waste your pain. If you are going to fall, you might as well rise with something new in your hands: knowledge, wisdom, strength. Every obstacle can make you stronger for what comes next, if you let it. Every rejection can redirect you closer to where you are meant to be, if you are willing to see it that way. So, the next time failure finds you, and it will, remember that you have a choice. You can let it be the end of your story, or you can let it be a turning point. You can treat it as evidence that you weren't enough, or you can treat it as feedback, guiding you to become more. The obstacle is not there to stop you. It is there to shape you. And perhaps the most important truth of all is this: The world does not remember people for their flawless victories. It remembers them for their resilience, for their willingness to keep going, for their ability to transform failure into growth. If you can begin to see failure in that light, not as a final judgment, but as preparation, you will discover that the very moments you once feared most can become the foundation of your greatest strength. The people who leave a lasting mark on us are rarely those who walked an easy path, free of obstacles. Instead, they are the ones who kept going when nothing made sense, the ones who pressed forward without guarantees, who leaned on belief when clarity was nowhere to be found. Their resilience was not born of certainty, but of trust, a quiet conviction, and a simple decision to keep moving, even when the ground beneath them felt shaky. These are the stories that stir our souls, for they remind us that strength is not born in calm waters, but in the heart of the storm. And at the center of that strength, there is always belief. Resilience is not about never breaking. It is about refusing to stay broken. You fall, you stumble, you are bruised by life, but belief whispers, "This is not where the story ends." That belief is what helps you rise, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always with something new in your hands. When life confronts us with uncertainty, the easy response is to freeze, to wait until everything makes sense before taking a step. But waiting rarely brings answers. The ones who inspire us did not wait for certainty. They trusted their capacity to adapt along the way. They believed that even without seeing the whole path, each step forward would reveal a little more of the way. This belief-based resilience doesn't just shape outcomes, it shapes identity. Each time you face hardship and refuse to collapse, you begin to see yourself differently. You begin to trust your own strength. The next storm doesn't feel quite as terrifying because you carry the evidence of what you have already endured. That evidence becomes belief, and that belief becomes resilience. It is a cycle, and it begins with the decision to move rather than to surrender. Think of someone you have watched endure great hardship, a family member, a friend, a public figure. What struck you most was not that they had all the answers, but that they simply did not give up. They embodied a kind of faith, not in a specific outcome, but in their ability to find a way through. Their belief was not naive. It was practical. It gave them the strength to stay in the fight long enough for the tide to turn. And in witnessing that, you were reminded of your own capacity to endure. Resilience does not just lift the person who carries it. It lifts all who see it. But belief is not something you simply stumble into. It is something you practice. It is choosing, again and again, to interpret difficulties as preparation rather than punishment. It is remembering that a rejection might be a redirection, that a setback might be a setup for something greater. Resilience built through belief has a quiet authority. It does not shout or demand attention. It carries itself with a steadiness that others can feel. This is why resilient people are often the ones others look to in times of chaos. Their calm does not come from knowing the outcome. It comes from trusting their ability to adapt, to endure, to keep going, regardless of the outcome. What is so powerful about this mindset is that it requires no extraordinary talent, intelligence, or resources. It requires only belief. Belief that your story is not over when things go wrong. Belief that even in pain, something valuable can be found. Belief that setbacks are temporary, but growth is permanent. And this belief applies not just to monumental crises, but to the everyday as well. The small frustrations, the disappointments, the moments when nothing seems to work. Each time you practice resilience in the small things, you prepare yourself for the larger storms. Of course, none of this means resilience makes life easy. Struggles still hurt. Losses still sting, and uncertainty can still shake you. But resilience does not remove the storm. It gives you an anchor within it. Over time, this way of living transforms how you see yourself. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this making of me?" That subtle shift is the essence of resilience. It changes your relationship with hardship. Instead of being something you merely survive, it becomes something that shapes you into someone stronger, wiser, and more capable. And resilience spreads. When others see you endure with belief, they gain the courage to do the same. Your presence becomes proof that survival and growth are possible. You don't need to give a speech or offer advice. The way you carry yourself becomes the evidence. You become a living reminder that resilience is not about certainty, but about belief. And in a world where fear spreads so quickly, that kind of belief is contagious in the best possible way. The people who inspire us most are those who embodied this truth. They were not immune to pain, they were not spared from loss, and they were not given clear answers. But they chose to keep moving anyway, to trust that the next step would lead somewhere meaningful. And in that choice, they built resilience, not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. So when your own path feels heavy, when the ground feels unsteady, remember this. Resilience does not require certainty. It requires belief. Belief that you can take the next step. Belief that obstacles can become the way forward. Belief that you are being shaped, not destroyed. And each time you act from that place, you strengthen not just yourself, but everyone who crosses your path. Because resilience built through belief is not just survival, it is transformation. It is the decision to keep becoming, even when life doesn't make sense. And that decision is what makes you unshakable. The strongest people are not always the ones who speak the loudest, who push their presence into every room, or who make themselves impossible to ignore. Strength is not always noise. Often, true strength is quiet. It is steady. It is the person who feels no need to prove themselves in every conversation, because their presence speaks more powerfully than their words. This quiet authority of steadiness is a rare quality, but when you encounter it, you feel it instantly. It changes the atmosphere. When storms rage, they do not flail or panic. They remain anchored, and in their steadiness, others find their own ground. They live as if they trust that secret order Jung spoke of, the cosmos within the chaos. While others are swept up in the frantic currents of fear, outrage, or uncertainty, they stand still. Their calm becomes a mirror, reflecting a sense of possibility back to everyone around them. It isn't that they are unaffected by life. They feel the sting of setbacks, the weight of loss, and the chill of the unknown. But they refuse to let those feelings dictate their posture. Their authority comes not from a desire to control others, but from a mastery of themselves. This kind of authority never needs to be demanded, because people gravitate toward it naturally. Think of moments when things fell apart, at work, in your family, among friends. Panic spreads like fire. Emotions spiral. In those moments, people search for someone, anyone who isn't drowning. And when they find someone steady, someone grounded, they hold on to that presence. Not because that person has all the answers, but because they carry themselves as if the answers can be found. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The steady person lives this truth, and their example calls others back to it. This quiet authority is built, not born. It grows from the daily discipline of choosing not to be carried away by every impulse, every headline, every wave of emotion. It comes from practicing patience, holding perspective, and refusing to let temporary feelings dictate permanent decisions. As Aristotle wrote, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." That patience, the ability to remain composed when others are restless, is what creates trust. People may admire the loudest voice in the room for a moment, but they will remember the steady presence that guided them through the chaos for a lifetime. What makes this quality so powerful is that it does not deny reality. It does not look at a storm and pretend the skies are clear. Instead, it says, "Yes, the storm is here, but it will not define me." It acknowledges fear without letting fear take the lead. It feels doubt without surrendering to it. This balance is what creates quiet authority. While others argue, complain, or collapse, the steady person keeps moving with measured steps. Their progress may not be flashy, but it endures long after the noise has faded. The steady person understands that trials are a part of life's refining process. They do not waste energy wishing away the difficulty. They use it. They let it teach them patience, perspective, and resilience. Over time, that practice creates an inner stillness that no outer chaos can fully disturb. And when others witness this, they lean into it because it represents a stability they crave but have not yet mastered. This quiet authority also protects you from the traps of ego. Loudness often comes from insecurity, from a need to prove something to the world. But steadiness requires no performance. It is not about being admired or recognized. It is about being aligned with yourself, calm in your values, and clear in your direction. And a magnetic trust flows from this. When people see you are not reactive, they feel safer. They know you will not fly off the handle at the first provocation. They know you will not crumble when things get hard. They know you will not betray your values when the pressure mounts. This consistency, this steadiness, builds trust more deeply than charm ever could. Trust, after all, is not built in a single dramatic moment, but in the quiet accumulation of calm choices made under pressure. Consider how this quality reshapes entire environments. A family where one person refuses to escalate arguments sets a new tone. A workplace where a leader remains calm under fire steadies the whole team. A community that follows someone steady rather than someone loud builds itself on patience instead of panic. The quiet authority of steadiness ripples outward, lowering the temperature wherever it goes. Its influence is subtle but profound. And the irony is that this quiet authority almost always outlasts the loudest voices. People may remember someone's fiery words for a moment, but they remember another's steadiness for a lifetime. They remember the person who was there when things were uncertain, who remained composed when others fell apart, who carried themselves with dignity when dignity felt impossible. That memory becomes a source of strength, something others can borrow from when they face their own storms. Resilience and steadiness are not glamorous. They do not demand attention. But they are powerful precisely because they endure. In a world addicted to noise, anger, and speed, the person who remains calm, thoughtful, and steady stands out more than ever. They are the anchor in waters that toss others back and forth. They are the quiet presence that reminds us that not everything has to be frantic. They embody a kind of authority that doesn't need to be claimed, because it is already felt. So, if you wish to embody true strength, do not worry about being the loudest. Do not worry about proving yourself in every conversation. Focus instead on building steadiness, on mastering your emotions, aligning with your values, exercising patience, and trusting your capacity to endure. For the strongest people are not those who shout the most. They are the ones who stay anchored when the storms rage. Their calm resolve changes the temperature of every room they enter, leaving behind something far more powerful than noise, a quiet authority that others can trust, lean on, and be inspired by. So much of life is spent waiting for validation. We hold back, pausing until someone else confirms that we are good enough, smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough. We look for a sign from the world that we belong before we dare to take a single step. But the truth is, the waiting never ends. The world does not line up to hand out permission slips for your life. If you spend your time waiting to be chosen, you will spend your life on the sidelines. At some point, you must stop waiting for proof and become your own evidence. You must let your actions, your persistence, and your courage be the undeniable facts that no one can take away. Think about how we so often measure ourselves. We tell ourselves, if I succeed at this job, then I will know I am competent. If this relationship works out, then I will know I am lovable. If this project gets recognition, then I will know I have value. But this way of thinking places all our power outside of ourselves. It puts our worth in the hands of circumstances we cannot control. And that is a dangerous trap, because success is not always immediate. Recognition is not always given, and people do not always see your value right away. If your belief in yourself depends entirely on external approval, you will always be fragile. But if you create your own evidence, through your persistence, through your courage, you will carry a kind of strength that no one can diminish. When you see yourself as someone waiting to be validated, your life will reflect hesitation and doubt. But when you see yourself as someone capable of building evidence through action, your life begins to reflect strength and movement. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you strengthen that identity. Every time you try again after a failure, you reinforce it. Happiness does not come from waiting for recognition. It comes from creating evidence that you are already living with purpose. And this is the secret. The evidence does not need to be dramatic. It does not have to be a grand victory or a monumental achievement. It can be as simple as showing up when you said you would, finishing the task you wanted to avoid, or pushing through discomfort instead of retreating. These small actions are the building blocks of an unshakable self. They prove something not to the world, but to you. They are the quiet, steady work of becoming your own evidence, of transforming failure into feedback, and of building a resilience that needs no outside permission to exist. This is the path to a strength that is not granted, but earned. It is quiet, it is steady, and it is yours alone. Every promise you keep to yourself, every small act of discipline, serves as a quiet reminder of who you are. Someone who follows through, someone who does not yield at the first sign of difficulty. Each piece of evidence, no matter how small, forges a deeper trust in yourself, and trust is the very bedrock of confidence. To wait for others to prove your worth is one of life's greatest wastes. The minutes, hours, and years you spend holding back could be spent building a fortress of proof. Imagine how much stronger, how much more resilient you would be if every flicker of doubt had been met not with hesitation, but with action. Instead of squandering your energy waiting for permission, you would be building momentum, a trail of evidence that declares, I am capable because I have acted. Of course, building this evidence does not mean ignoring failure. It means reframing it as a vital part of the process. Every rejection, every misstep, every mistake is also proof. It is the undeniable proof that you dared to try, that you had the courage to learn, and the strength to survive. Failure is not the absence of evidence. It is one of its most rugged and honest forms. Because every time you rise again, you prove that your belief in yourself is greater than any single setback. Becoming your own evidence also transforms how the world perceives you. People are not moved by words alone. They are inspired by presence, by consistency, by the way you carry yourself through the storms of life. When you embody resilience, others feel it. They see in your example the permission to believe in themselves. Your evidence becomes a shared strength. Without realizing it, You become the proof that others lean on when their own belief begins to waver. That is why your courage matters far beyond yourself. It is for everyone who is watching. It's easy to underestimate this ripple effect. You may think your actions go unnoticed, that your quiet persistence is of no consequence to anyone else. But the truth is, your life is always witnessed. By friends, family, colleagues, even strangers. And when they see you persist, when they see you move with quiet conviction, they find a measure of courage for themselves. Your evidence becomes their evidence. Your example becomes the proof they borrow when they need it most. This journey is not easy. There will always be voices, both external and internal, whispering that you are not enough, that you need more validation before you can proceed. There will be moments when doubt feels louder than belief. But each time you act in spite of those voices, you diminish their power. Each time you choose courage over hesitation, you shift the balance. Doubt may never disappear entirely, but it doesn't have to. You don't need silence in your mind. You need evidence in your life. And evidence does not lie. You can tell yourself stories of inadequacy, but if your actions prove persistence, the evidence is undeniable. You can fear rejection, but if your actions prove resilience, the evidence will always outweigh the fear. Over time, this evidence becomes stronger than doubt. It becomes a foundation you can stand on when everything else feels uncertain. The world will always have its opinions. People will project their fears, their limitations, and their judgments onto you. But their opinions are not evidence. They are noise. The only evidence that truly matters is the evidence you create for yourself. And the beautiful thing is, once you have built enough of it, their noise can no longer touch you. You carry the proof within you. You know who you are, not because someone told you, but because you have lived it. So stop waiting for the world to deem you worthy. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect validation. Begin now, with small steps and imperfect actions, with a courage that doesn't need to be flawless. Each action is a stone in your foundation. Each choice to persist is a testament to your strength. One day, you will look back and realize that you no longer needed the world to choose you, because you had already chosen yourself. You became your own evidence. And in doing so, you didn't just build a life, you built a legacy of proof that others can see, learn from, and follow. Because when you become your own evidence, you don't just free yourself from doubt, you light the path for others to believe in themselves too. Your mindset is never just your own. We like to imagine that our thoughts and our responses to life begin and end with us. But that is never the case. Belief is contagious. It leaks into our conversations, our body language, our quiet moments of resolve. People are watching how you respond to difficulty. They notice the tone in your voice when you are challenged, the way you carry yourself when things go wrong, the steadiness you hold in the face of uncertainty. And those observations plant seeds. When you act from a place of possibility, you create ripples of that possibility for everyone around you. You become a reference point, a model of what can be achieved when one chooses to lead with belief instead of fear. Think of a room where one person's energy shifts the entire atmosphere. Panic can spread like wildfire, and negativity can drain the spirit from everyone. But so can calm, so can optimism, so can resilience. The mindset of one can truly change the mindset of many. This ripple effect doesn't require grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It happens in the smallest of ways. The parent who keeps hope alive through hardship, the friend who listens with patience instead of panic, the leader who shows steadiness when chaos looms. In the moment, they may not realize it, but their presence is shaping others. It is offering a subtle permission to believe, to keep going, to trust that the story isn't over. But this ripple works in both directions. Just as your optimism can inspire, your despair can discourage. When you consistently respond with hopelessness, others learn hopelessness from you. A child raised in the shadow of constant doubt may grow to doubt themselves. A team led by someone who expects failure will move timidly, as if the outcome is already sealed. This is why cultivating belief is not merely a personal choice. It is a responsibility. The ripples you create do not stop with you. They move outward, shaping futures in ways you may never fully see. This is how belief spreads across generations. A parent who models persistence teaches it more effectively than any lecture ever could. A mentor who faces challenges with optimism imprints that mindset on their students. Years later, in their own moments of trial, they will remember, "This is how it's done. I have seen it before." That is the true ripple effect of belief, not in what you say once, but in how you consistently live. The beauty of this is that you will rarely know its full reach. Someone you barely spoke to might remember your composure in a crisis. A colleague might recall your steadiness years after you've parted ways. A friend might draw strength from your example in a moment you'll never even know about. The impact of your belief is not always visible, but it is always present. Like ripples in water, it travels further than you can imagine, touching shores you will never see. And here is the deeper truth. This ripple effect does not require your perfection. People are not inspired by flawless individuals who never stumble. They are inspired by those who stumble and get back up. They are inspired by those who admit to doubt but refuse to be stopped by it. They are inspired by the humanity of belief, not the performance of it. So if you think your mindset is only about you, think again. Every time you choose belief over fear, you grant others permission to do the same. Every time you act as if things will work out, you steady someone else's trembling hands. Every time you embody resilience, you plant seeds of it in those who are watching. Your life is evidence, not just for yourself, but for everyone who crosses your path. In a world that so easily defaults to fear, your belief is an act of service. The story you tell yourself is the most powerful force in your life. It is not a passive backdrop. It is the silent architect of your reality. It shapes how you move, how you speak, and how you respond to the inevitable setbacks. Your stories are not just thoughts. They are blueprints. If you tell yourself a story of limitation, you will live cautiously, shrinking from risk, certain the world is against you. But if you tell yourself a story of possibility, of strength, of resilience, you begin to walk with intention, to work with vision, to endure hardship with a deeper sense of meaning. This is why it matters to live the story you want to believe. Because in the end, belief is not just an idea, it becomes a way of life. Consider two people facing rejection. One tells a story of misfortune. "This always happens to me. I'll never succeed." The other tells a story of redirection. "This wasn't the right fit. Something better is ahead." These two stories will lead them down entirely different paths. One spirals downward, hesitant to try again. The other moves forward, fueled by the belief that their journey is still unfolding. Living the story you want to believe does not mean ignoring reality's sharp edges. It means framing those difficulties in a way that allows you to grow instead of collapse. A person who carries the story that their best days are behind them walks with resignation, their energy drained by the belief that nothing ahead is worth the effort. But a person who tells themselves the best is yet to come walks differently. They work with anticipation, endure with patience, and rise with hope. That story fuels their persistence. As Aristotle wrote, "Hope is a waking dream." The story you tell yourself is either a dream that awakens you to your potential or one that keeps you asleep. At first, living a new story can feel like swimming against the current. Old narratives cling tightly. Self-doubt can feel strangely comfortable in its familiarity. But with each choice you make that aligns with a better story, you strengthen it. Each step forward writes another line. Slowly, the old story loses its grip. This is not about pretending. It is about alignment, making sure the story in your mind matches the future you intend to create. The strongest people are not those who avoided hardship, but those who wrote a story that gave their hardship meaning. They endured, not because life was easy, but because their narrative allowed them to see beyond the immediate pain. Every day is a new page. Every choice, a new sentence. Every belief, a theme. The story you are telling yourself right now is building your future, line by line. If you want a different future, you must begin with a different story. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions improve. Now. Live the story where setbacks are training. Live the story where rejection is redirection. Live the story where the best is yet to come. Because when you live that story, you don't just change your own life. You create a blueprint that others can follow. And there is no greater legacy than that. In the end, the story you live becomes the story you leave behind. Choose one that strengthens you, one that lifts others, one that proves resilience is always possible. If this message spoke to you, continue the journey with us. Watch one of the videos on your screen now. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where together we turn philosophy into a way of life.